I've got 1:30 p.m. on February 4th, 2022, and this is a joint meeting of the Executive and Legislative Committees of the Criminal Justice Commission. Before we get started, I want to read the following statement to any member of the public who wants to join us later. Members of the public wishing to attend the meeting in person must follow all federal and state COVID-19 safety protocols, including wearing a mask and maintaining acceptable social distancing. In order to facilitate virtual participation in the meeting, members of the public wishing to address the committee members will need to email Molly Edwards at medwards@azcjc.gov in advance of the meeting and provide a phone number where you can be reached. Staff will then email you an acknowledgement of your request and call you during the call to the public for your comment. Any action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for further discussion and decision at a later date. And with that, I will call this meeting to order. And Wendy, are you prepared to help us with the roll call?
Yes, I am. Steve Stahl.
Present.
Sheila Polk.
Present. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you. David Sanders.
Present.
Dave Byers. Alistair Adele.
Good afternoon, Rebecca Baker for Alistair Adele.
Jean Bishop. Chris Nanos.
Buddy James for Chris Nanos.
Kara Riley.
Curtis Hicks for Kara Riley.
Heston Silbert.
Blaze Bags for Heston Silbert.
Chairperson Sanders, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Wendy. Earlier today, I received word that Commissioner Laura Conover, the Pima County Attorney, might want to send a proxy on her behalf. Although she's not a member of either of these committees, we welcome any commissioner who wants to attend. Did you receive a proxy on behalf of Commissioner Conover?
Chief, this is Andy. I don't see anybody else online, so if somebody else joins, we'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our January 21, 2022 meeting. If you've had a chance to review the minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve.
This is Rebecca Baker. I move that we approve the minutes from the meeting of January 20.
I second.
Mr. Chairman, we need one clarification on that. That would be January 21st, 2022.
My apologies. The minutes of January 21st of 2022.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further comment or discussion? Hearing none, all that approve or accept these minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Sheila Polk, I was not able to attend that meeting, so I have abstained from voting on approving the minutes.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 3 on our agenda, and we'll turn it over to Molly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I appreciate you spending your Friday for a little bit with us. We are 26 days into the legislative session with a total of 1,532 bills having been introduced. Of those 1,532 bills, ACJC is currently tracking 109 criminal justice related bills. There has been a flurry of activity over the last couple of weeks just because everyone's trying to get their bills in and also get their bills scheduled for committees. So I kind of feel like this might be a quick meeting just because we covered so many bills in the last meeting that we had. So I'll provide some high level overview of our bills and a few other bills that have gotten more traction over the last couple of weeks. And at the end, please let us know if you have any questions or concerns or other bills that you would like to bring to this group for discussion. So ACJC's two bills that we have are House Bill 2132, which is our Victims Compensation Funding Bill. I'm just giving a shorter title for that. And House Bill 2133, which is our CJEF funding bill. As you all know, Representative Kavanaugh agreed to sign on to represent those bills or sponsor those bills. Mary and I have been meeting with legislators over the last couple of weeks, as many as Mary's been able to get scheduled with House leaders or representatives, sorry, and on the Judiciary Committee and Appropriations. And the people that we've met so far seem cautiously supportive, which is good. Some have given us a definitive yes, and others have remained non-committal, but seem supportive. I wouldn't want to say that we've absolutely got everyone's support, but at least we've seen a lot of favorable discussion. Director Lefebvre was able to participate in a meeting with Representative Germain, and I felt that that was also a really fruitful discussion as well. Chairman Blackman has agreed to hear both bills in Judiciary next Wednesday, which we're very happy about. One note on House Bill 2133, it does have an amendment. Representative Kavanaugh introduced some language that was not originally in our bill that we proposed, and it had to do with Section 12-11609 regarding fines and fees. The courts are allowed to offer people payment plans so that the courts do not immediately collect monetary obligations at the time of sentencing. So the way the language was drafted would prohibit that, and it would be the only type of assessment in all of their assessments that is not allowed to be placed on a payment plan, which would cause a lot of administrative issues for the courts. And so the courts actually at least came to me and said, can we propose a language change? And so the way it was written was, notwithstanding any other law, the assessment may not be waived, suspended, or delayed. And they asked if we could change the word to mitigated. They also wanted to put a provision that delayed the effective date to December 31st, 2022, just because the amount of time it will take to program their systems. We're neutral on that because it doesn't really impact us that much, but obviously Director Byers is not on the meeting, and I didn't know if there was anything else that he would have wanted to add to that. So we said, go ahead. It was not going to impact us. And speak of the devil, there's Director Byers now. Let's see if we can see him. Is he coming on? Hi, Director. How are you? You're muted.
Sorry to be running late. I'm running fast today.
That's okay. Thank you for joining us. We were just talking about the amendment to House Bill 2133 that Elise had proposed regarding the assessment, where Kavanaugh had wanted to have waived, suspended, or delayed, and we moved that to mitigated so that individuals could at least remain on a payment plan if they needed to for court fees. And I was just saying that ACJC we were neutral on that. That's fine with us.
Okay.
We have, let's see. And I think that's it. House Bill 2132, there's really no changes on that. We have fact sheets that we're working on that I will be distributing to all of you today, as well as our stakeholders. We would just like to have any support that we can have. I know a few of you have expressed interest in being present, if need be, to speak on both of those bills. Mr. Chairman and Director Byers, we are scheduled to go to Judiciary next week on both House Bill 2132 and House Bill 2133. So again, we would just ask this body if you are able to participate or be present, we would truly appreciate it, and any support you can provide. That includes maybe even signing in and support if you so choose to. That is that on our bills. Before I move on, are there any questions or discussion?
Mr. Chair, Sheila Polk.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. What is that amendment that you just discussed? The current language is delayed. And so the way I read that particular provision of 2133, it's just that that penalty of $4 that cannot be delayed. So the amendment changed the word delayed to mitigated. What does mitigated mean? What's the reason behind this amendment?
Madam Chair, it's Andy. I believe, according to the conversations that we've heard, the courts allow for folks to be on a payment plan for fines and fees that are assessed. I believe they're concerned with the word delayed. Would not being able to be delayed would mean that $4 would have to be paid immediately. And that would be the only thing in statute that is required to be paid immediately and not have the potential to be put on a payment plan. I believe Mr. Kavanaugh's intent was that judges would not be able to waive that fee or not have the fee be paid. And I think he used the term delayed in his best attempt to make that happen, when the term mitigated was probably the more appropriate term.
You know, there's other fees that can't be waived also. So it's not just the $4. When you have a person in front of you, by initiative, there was the clean elections fee. There might be others. So it's not like they just pay $4 and walk out. It might be more money than that. But, you know, we deal with a lot of people that are homeless, that come into court with mental illness problems. They don't have any money. And so I think that's what they're looking at, is that a lot of these people wind up on a time payment fee or have to do community service restitution to pay it off. And so the statutes require all fines to be paid immediately at court. That doesn't happen very often. No. I think that's the intent. But you can't waive it. You got to pay it off one way or the other.
Thank you.
Question, Madam Chair?
Yes, the recommendation from staff for us is that we remain neutral on that amendment.
Mr. Chairman, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Well, I guess if we didn't, what would we do? Let's think this through, because I don't know there's the biggest deal to us, but so a person's in court and they have no money and they got to pay these fines. We're going to put them in jail then for $4 or $14. I think the surcharge is 10% or something on the clean elections. I mean, if that's the problem the judges face, what do they do if they must pay and cannot?
Mr. Chairman and members, I believe the amendment is to make it conform with all the other ways that the court deals with fines and fees. I think that was the intent of the amendment as I understood it.
Yeah, no, I get that, but let's say we didn't amend it, then I think we might be in a situation where we're kind of stuck with what do you do with a person. So I think that's why the amendment's there.
Mr. Chair, Sheila Polk.
Go ahead, please.
I think that probably is the intent. I think the recommendation, I don't know where this amendment came from. I'm guessing it came from the victim community. And I think the recommendation that ACJC remain neutral on the amendment, obviously we support this bill, but that we remain neutral on the amendment is a good recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Polk, thank you. And I believe the amendment actually came from the courts. I believe Elise was looking at the language and was just noting that it wasn't in conformity with what was happening with the courts. And she also put a delay date on there, as she recommended a delay date just because they would have to change their systems, I believe. And Mr. Chairman, Director Byers would have to, I guess, provide more insights on that.
I actually misspoke. My apologies. I think this language requiring the language increasing that assessment from $2 to $4 and that language that the assessment cannot be waived, suspended, or delayed. I think that language came from the victim community, and now the amendment is coming from the courts. But I think the recommendation that we remain neutral on the amendment is a good recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Polk, thank you. Any other discussion before we move on? Okay, so a new bill that we have added this week for tracking is Senate Bill 1712, which is the Victim Notification Fund Bill. This bill was introduced by Senator Gowan and has been assigned to appropriations with a hearing next Tuesday. This bill enables the deployment of a county-based automated crime victim notification system to law enforcement and prosecuting agencies. ACJC received grant funding from the Federal Office of Victims of Crime, OVC, last year to implement phase 1 of a statewide automated victim information and notification program. This program is currently being rolled out to Arizona's 15 sheriff's offices. And again, this is phase 1 that we are working on. So we feel that this bill is duplicative of our efforts that we are currently undertaking. In addition, we have partnered with the Department of Economic Security to close loopholes on individuals who are incarcerated and have been collecting benefits from the state. And so we've that added benefit in saving the state money for those individuals who should not be receiving funds once they are incarcerated. So we have a meeting with Senator Gowan on Monday to discuss our program. I believe Rebecca Baker will also be joining us in that discussion. I don't know if Director Lefevre has anything else he'd like to add.
Thank you, Molly. Mr. Chair and members, again, I won't speak ill of where I think the bill's coming from at this stage, but clearly there's a lot that goes on at the state that not everybody's aware of. So the main purpose of our meeting will be to make the chairman aware of what we're doing. Again, if the intent of the legislature is to fund something, hopefully we can discuss the possibility of that funding that they would like to appropriate being used for a process that's already gone through state procurement, bid, and award versus a brand new process. Understanding that what they're looking at is for all law enforcement agencies and prosecutors to ultimately be utilizing a system, which obviously we would love to do with the future phases of our program. So we'll have that conversation. And Rebecca, I believe you actually had some concerns with the way the bill was worded with the flow of information for victim notification, which I'm not sure if that's something you would like to address or not.
Yeah, our Victim Services Division is looking at it, and they're putting together a list of concerns that they have about the language. Sean Cox indicated that the notifications that are in the bill don't match up with the statutory notifications that we generally provide. So on top of the fact that we already have, you all are already working on this process, the language that they have doesn't work either.
Thank you, Rebecca. So Mr. Chairman and members, this appears to be a bill that is being generated on behalf of a potential vendor for consideration, which happens quite frequently at the legislature. So again, when we have a better understanding after the conversation, we will see where that goes, and we'll be ready to testify at committee if necessary. So again, hopefully we'll get some kind of resolution that makes sense. But again, encouraging that the legislature might like to appropriate money to a project, and if so, hopefully we can have it appropriated appropriately to the right project.
Molly?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Chairman, Mr. Director Byers.
Is Mike Williams the lobbyist on this bill?
Mr. Chairman and members, I believe so.
We have a hunch.
So he's coming to the meeting on Monday. That leads me to believe that
he
is
is?
accurate. Yes.
Okay,
Then yes, that would be correct.
got it.
I'd like to welcome Jean Bishop to our meeting. Welcome.
Thank you. Apologize for being late.
That's okay. That's okay. All right, Director, Chief, can I move on?
Yes, please.
All right. So the following bills are very high level. They're ones that we are tracking closely. I'm just going to kind of cover some of the ones that either directly mention ACJC and are moving. And at the end of that, if anyone has any other bills they would like to bring forward, just let me know, okay? So House Bill 2044 is Representative Biasucci's bill, which is the Juvenile Dependency State Aid Appropriation. It was assigned to House Appropriations on January 12th and received a due pass on the 20th from House Appropriations. This bill appropriates $2 million to the general fund from the general fund to the State Aid for Juvenile Dependency Proceedings Fund, mouthful. And ACJC would administer this funding if passed. This would provide state aid to public defenders, legal defenders, and contract indigent defense counsel for the processing of juvenile defendants. The next two bills, this past week, we had a meeting with Representative Germain to go over our bills as well as discuss the three bills that she is putting forward that do in fact impact ACJC. We have been neutral on her bills, and in speaking with Representative Germain, let's talk about the membership bill first. That is, she's got two of them, House Bill 2140 and House Bill 2141. The first one, and I believe the last time we spoke, and Blaze, you had mentioned this there, the first one involves adding a Indigenous representative to boards and commissions. And I don't remember specifically, it's our agency and then two others. I didn't note them in here. And Blaze, what are the other two that she's wanting to add people to?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Molly, it is the Constable Ethics Standards and Training Board, and the AZ Post, yeah.
Okay. So, and then House Bill 2141 would actually, again, it's been confusing because they're not adding a member. What they're doing is they're asking to have an existing member, someone who is currently, they're just wanting representation of a tribal member. And I know this group has spoken on this, and we are neutral unless the commission again asks us as staff to take a different position. But I thought the conversation about those particular two bills was fine. I don't know if Director Lefevre wanted to add anything from the discussion on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. So the conversation, I agree, was a good conversation with Representative Germain. The bill does not change the makeup of the commission's statutorily members in the sense that it's trying to take a member off of the commission. It is basically saying of those that are listed, so that the county attorneys, the sheriffs, the chiefs, the public retired judge, all the folks that are there, that does not change. It's simply stating that one of the members must also be a member of a federally recognized tribe. Again, we have put forward names for consideration that are parts of tribes, and for whatever reason, the governor has decided not to appoint them. Again, ultimately, that is not control that I or we have as a body. That is completely up to the governor's office. So my recommendation would be that we remain neutral on that. I don't think that's a bad possible addition to the commission to have that perspective on, and it doesn't. And my concern was taking away the criminal justice experience from the commission membership as it's outlined in statute to replace it with a tribal member. If the additional requirement is just that one of those spots should also be a tribal member, then I think that's a factor that we can work with to try and identify members for consideration that meet that requirement.
Any discussion from the committee about those two bills?
Mr. Chair, Steve Stahl. Director Lefevre, is the language of the bill such that it is clear that that is what they're asking for, so that we don't get caught in a pinch later on where, well, that's what we meant, but how it's worded requires us to replace?
That, Mr. Chairman, members, that is how I read it. So I thought it was clearly worded. And by no means have I been corrupted by a law degree to think otherwise.
That's all I'm concerned about. Thank you.
It's going to require the governor to appoint somebody, right? So it really is a limitation or a direction to the governor, isn't it, Andy?
Correct. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Byers, that would be correct. The governor would have to, in one of those 14 appointed slots, ensure that one of them is a tribal member, or not appoint one. So again, we currently have had several vacancies that have not been appointed. So, again, we have put forward tribal names for consideration in the past, and we'll continue to try and do that going forward.
Molly, is there another bill that would expand the number of commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, there are actually, I believe there is another bill that Senator Casada is putting forward. And so my only concern or caution that, and we've been staying on top of this, is if in fact this bill does make it out of the House and move over to the Senate, our intent is still to remain neutral, but I have a feeling that once it makes it over to the Senate, there may be a proposal for an amendment to add more members to the commission.
And in the past, have we generally opposed that?
Mr. Chairman, members, yes, the commission's position has consistently been that they would oppose a bill to do anything with membership that is not put forward except by the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Bishop just brought forward, it's Senate Bill 1544 on your, I think you have it on a list. So that is the one that Senator Casada is putting forward.
Okay.
So, and also meeting with Representative Germain, and this is also, we had, I thought, a very fruitful discussion with her. House Bill 2143 is the ACJC Victims Compensation Allocation Bill. It was referred to House Military and Public Affairs. We met with Representative Germain this week on the 1st. She has agreed to move that particular language over to a rulemaking, or is that correct? Proper rulemaking, so that we can make this change that she's proposing. And I'll let Director Lefevre maybe talk a little bit more about that. And we're taking steps to meet with Kim Russell on legislative staff. Is that correct in the rules? Okay. So we're going to be meeting with her to help move that from a bill over to a rulemaking process. And so I'll have Director Lefevre maybe talk a little bit about what she's proposing for that rule change.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members, so she is part of the work of the Missing and Indigenous or Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women's Group. They identified some Native American associated costs with burials and funeral expenses that they wanted to guarantee were covered. We feel they already are covered under the rule process and have asked that we not explicitly put that into statute. She's okay with us just clarifying in the rules to make sure that they feel comfortable with the language. So we will do that as part of our normal rulemaking process and review. I believe next year is the year that the victims rules would come open again. So she was fine with that and appreciated our willingness to address those concerns in that fashion. And we always appreciate the ability to do it during the rule process versus opening statute up to make that change. So happy to answer questions if there's any around that.
All right, hearing none. House Bill 2573, which has been introduced by Representative Blackman, is the Alternative Prosecution Diversion Fund and Appropriation. This was referred to House Judiciary on 124 and has a hearing on 29 in House Judiciary. It appropriates $20 million from the general fund to the newly established Alternative Prosecution and Diversion Program Fund to be administered by ACJC, and it is allocated to county attorneys to establish and operate alternative prosecution and diversion programs and to explore, develop, and apply and evaluate evidence-based practices for alternative prosecution and diversion programs. Again, we're remaining neutral on it, but again, just letting you know that this bill is in fact moving. No, I'm sorry, Ms. Polk, that is your bill. I'm sorry. Maybe need to notate that. Thank you.
Well,
Did you-
since this is a prosecutor's bill, Sheila?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Sheila Polk.
Thank you.
Yes, this bill has, this is coming from the county attorneys and requesting funding to fund primarily our diversion programs. We are, last year this was put forth, it did not pass. And last year's bill had money appropriated directly to the county attorneys, and it was a the county attorneys have decided this year, and in consultation with Mr. Lefevre, and this is my advice as well, I felt that a better way to run this program would be kind of through the same sort of grants programs that ACJC does already. And that way county attorneys can apply for funding. We can set up best practices and some other things.
Well, it sounds like a good idea. Does the, Mr. Chairman, do you think we should take a position on this one in favor of it? Why are we neutral?
Mr. Chairman and Director Byers, genuinely, we have taken neutral positions on funding bills where we are the recipient of those funds. So it always looks a little odd to maybe have us up there. We usually will get up and support being able to answer questions should they have questions specifically for it. But generally, this body is set to remain neutral because it is funding that would be coming to our agency. So that's the reason why we remain neutral unless that changes.
Well, it's really more work that'll be coming to the agency. I don't know. I mean, we are the Criminal Justice Commission. This strikes me as an potential improvement to the criminal justice system. Just because you have to administer it, I don't think we should automatically say we got to be neutral. I think people respect the commission, and if we had a view, and I don't know what other members think, but if we think this is a good improvement to the system, I think we should support it.
Mr. Chairman and members, we're happy to support if that is the wish or the will of this body.
So,
Mr. Chairman, Sheila Polk,
Please go ahead.
I think that Mr. Byers makes a good argument. Obviously, as one of the county attorneys that would be the beneficiary of the funding, I absolutely support the bill, and I would support the suggestion that CCJC support this bill as well. I like the argument from Mr. Byers that we are the Criminal Justice Commission, and obviously this bill is focused on front-end reform. How do we provide assistance to those primarily we're looking at substance abuse, but also other issues as well. How can we bring them services and keep them out of the criminal justice system? So I think that is a good suggestion, and I would support that.
Well, I'll make a motion just to see, so just we can get discussion going or get a vote. I'll make a motion that on this bill, the commission take a position to support the bill, regardless of whether the money comes to the commission or they decide to send it elsewhere, because it's a good concept for improvements in the criminal justice system. In addition, we are all faced with a huge backlog of criminal cases throughout the state, and we're going to have to find creative ways to deal with this backlog of cases from the pandemic or we'll never dig out. So I move that we support it.
I'll second that for discussion.
Who was the second, please?
Jean Bishop.
Thank you, Jean. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Mr. Chair, this is Steve Stahl. I absolutely agree. I want to make sure that the victim advocate, state victim advocate group is aware that we're going to support this.
Any additional comment? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Just for clarification, that is House Bill 2573 for the record. Moving on, Senate Bill 1216, which is the Orders of Protection and Duration Bill. That's by Senator Steele. It was referred to House Senate Judiciary on 119. Senator Steele is seeking to extend the orders of protection from 1 year to 2 years after service on the defendant. On 2-3, Senate Judiciary had a due pass with, I believe, an amendment, but I don't have the amendment handy on that particular bill. Senate Bill 1217 is the Emergency Orders of Protection bill. Senator Steele is seeking to I guess she would like emergency orders of protection to expire 5 calendar days after issuance instead of at the close of the next business day or the judicial business day. So I know those are the 2 bills that she's running right now. Is there any discussion? Well, actually, there's one more. There's Senate Bill 1219, which is the aggravated assault violation court order, which is referred to Senate Judiciary, was referred to Senate Judiciary on 119. Are there any discussion on her bills before I move on? Hearing none. The final bill that we've seen some traction on is a little traction, not a lot, is Senate Bill 1225 by Senator Casada. This is the Criminal Justice Information Reporting Collection Bill. This bill is a data bill, for lack of a better term, that is encapsulating a lot of different things that they're wanting to collect, very similar to last year. The language that is of concern to us is an entity that fails to collect and transmit data as required by this legislation is not eligible to receive monies from the commission or any state grant program for 5 years, which is extremely egregious, I feel, and we have concerns with that language. We do have a meeting with Senator Casada on February 23rd, which is about 2.5 weeks from now. And we're going to see if we can get this meeting moved up a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, apologies for the interruption. When you say it's seen traction, what does that mean?
It was referred to Senate Judiciary, so we're thinking there's movement. Sorry. So when I say traction, I mean it's been assigned, and I know they're aggressively working to get it to get a hearing in the next week. Whether they'll get that or not, I have no idea. But I think that this is a bill that we have flagged as concern, and I'm not sure.
I would say, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can we get a meeting with Peterson?
We can do that, yes.
I think we need to speak to the chairman about the concerns about this bill. Quite frankly, I think, having a 5-year prohibition on receiving funding seems a bit draconian to me. I don't know how the members feel, but
I like your word better. Instead of egregious, draconian. I like yours better. It does.
so I'm Mr. Chairman, I would ask that this body allow us to have a opposed position to this bill, specifically with that language in about the funding prohibition. As such, again, if the language would change, then maybe we come back with a different recommendation. But I would like to be able to stand up and say that is something we would oppose.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion that we oppose it for that reason.
What's the number on that bill?
It is Senate Bill 1225.
Okay, we have a motion from Chief Stahl. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is that from Commissioner Polk?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please.
I think I heard the motion is that we are opposing it merely on that last provision that withholds funding. I think we should oppose it because it conflicts with Bill 2166 from last year. I think we, as a commission, 2166 lays out a thoughtful strategic plan to collect data across the state. And after we complete all phases of it, we have a very effective system that provides assistance to and supports criminal justice agencies developing the databases and the software needed to collect and report the data at ACJC. And then it allows ACJC to collect and report that out. If you look at the details of 1225, it really flies in the face of 2166. It's requiring now the Attorney General to collect for the previous 2 weeks all sorts of data. And again, it's a lot of what our argument under 2166 is, let's be thoughtful about the data that we're collecting. Let's make it meaningful. We're working on identifying what are those key criminal justice metrics that should be collected. And if you look at the pages of data here that they want collected, it's just not consistent with the strategic approach that this commission took a leadership role in last year and in succeeding in getting the legislature to support it. So that's my opinion. I think we should oppose it, and any other data collection bill out there that is consistent with 2166.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead, Ms. Polk.
I was just going to say, perhaps I'm making a friendly amendment to the motion, and the amendment would be that we oppose the bill in its entirety for those reasons.
Chief Stahl, are you amenable to that amendment?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we have a motion to oppose that bill for myriad reasons, as articulated just now. Any further discussion before the vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to dovetail on what Ms. Polk just said about data collection. There are 2 data collection bills right now that are sponsored by Representative Kavanaugh. As you know, he is our sponsor for our 2 bills that are currently moving through. And he asked if we would be, I don't know if did he ask for our support, or he just said he was going to do it. Okay. House Bill 2326, which is the Criminal Justice Data Collection Bill. He's wanting to require all courts in Arizona to submit a list of information about each person who is in Arizona in violation of a federal immigration law and is convicted of a misdemeanor or felony offense. He has asked ACJC to house the data here in his bill. That's one bill. And then he also has House Bill 2583, which is a DUI information annual report. This is another data collection bill that would require ACJC to collect the data and submit that to the governor's office and legislature annually. So those are 2 bills that I would like to ask for what position you would like to take.
2350.
Oh, he's got, 2353 as well. That one involves Department of Corrections. Yeah, so that's not us, but. So I don't know if we want to keep the Department of Corrections one in with ours, but because that's not asking us to collect that data, but the first 2 are involving us to be the repository of that information.
Well, you won't have to worry about building much of a repository. We don't have the data. So there's no court that knows. When years ago, when legislation was passed, a lot of immigration legislation, we spent a lot of time with ICE. And the one thing I learned is it is really complicated to determine when a person is in the country illegally. They can be legal one day and illegal the next. Like you're on a student visa one day, fine, next day not. And so what we do in the courts is when someone's convicted of a felony and they're placed on probation, we don't deal with those that go on to corrections. Anybody who is foreign born, we notify ICE. ICE then makes the determination of whether they're in the country legally or illegally, and they make a determination to deport or not to deport. And we've had that system in place for years. I can tell, I think we're talking to Senator Kavanaugh, but the courts won't have any data, the report to you, because we don't have any way of knowing the people who come before the courts, particularly on misdemeanor cases. There's nothing that we would know to be able to report. All we could say is they're born outside the United States.
Mr. Chairman and members, I'm happy to have a more in-depth conversation with Mr. Kavanaugh to bring the same points that Ms. Polk brought up to his attention and consideration. And Mr. Byers, if you would like us to be at that meeting when you're discussing it with Mr. Kavanaugh, we're happy to participate in that as well.
And I can tell you over 25,000 people have been deported since we started doing this. And we also have a system with DPS. I know people don't realize this, but there's a flag that we put on in their system when a person's placed on probation and then is deported. There's a flag so that if then that person comes back into our country and DPS or any law enforcement stops them, it flags it that that person's still on probation in the U.S. So those are systems we put in place a number of years ago to deal with this situation.
So, Mr.
And
Chair,
Mr.
oh, go ahead, Ms. Polk.
If everyone would take a look at House Bill 2326, this is actually an amendment to our bill from last year, 2166. And the amendment is interesting. Dave, you'll like the language. It says, unless prohibited by federal or state law, the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission shall require all courts in this state to submit the following information to the commission. And the information must be available to the public on the commission's website. It's pretty straightforward and simple for each person who is in this state in violation of a federal immigration law and is convicted of a misdemeanor or felony offense. So I think in addition to all the problems that Dave has identified, this is again we have that approach out there. We have a really nice fact sheet on what this building that central collection agency, building that central collection point for all criminal justice should look like. And so I think with Representative Kavanaugh, just helping him understand that we have something out there and let's take our time and do it thoughtfully. I'll completely agree with Dave's comments. None of us know who is in this country legally or illegally. We have to ping ICE, and ICE is the one that makes that determination. I've lost count of how many visas there are out there that create exceptions to one status. So this has got lots of problems.
Mr. Chair, this is Steve Stahl. I would ask Blaze to also check and make sure that this doesn't violate NCIC.
Mr. Chair and Steve, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman and members, if I could suggest that we allow, just staff will go and talk to the Chair Kavanaugh, and see where we end up, and come back and report back necessary if we feel there's action that's needed.
And as of right now, Mr. Chairman and members, it has not been assigned to a committee. I don't believe it has. Let me double check that. Oh, it was referred to House Judiciary on 124. So, but it has not, at least not that I'm aware of.
And I'm pretty sure Mr. Blackman has indicated he's not going to allow data bills to move through his committee to allow 2166 to proceed. So we'll have a conversation with Mr. Blackman as well.
All right. Mr. Chair and members, that concludes my legislative report. Is there any more discussion or any other bills that this body would like to bring forward for discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I did want to have a discussion about 2583, which is another data collection bill. So this one is it would collect DUI information. And I'm just curious from staff's perspective at ACTC, what do you see as your capacity to collect this information? And in light of the conversation we keep having about 2166, how do you see this fitting in?
Madam Chair and members, I think if this information is being collected now and it's something that ultimately we would decide through the process this fall that the state would like collected and reported, then I believe we would add that into the system that we're seeking to build to collect and report that information. So again, a lot of this is going to end up flowing probably through what's being reported to DPS. So again, some of this will be a better understanding of all of those information points that are currently flowing, so that when we present the report in August, we're talking apples to apples across these systems.
What's the information that's required in this bill? I'm not familiar with it.
Mr. Chairman, Director Byers, there's a lot of, it's a fairly extensive list of things that they are asking for. Breakdown of various substances, narcotics, hallucinogens, stimulants. Yeah, it's whatever's under the influence they've included in this. It's
Mr. Chair, Sheila Polk, the individual who is behind this bill, he did call me and have a conversation with me. He is a really nice gentleman who lives in Colorado part of the year and in Arizona part of the year. He had an adult son who was killed by a marijuana impaired driver, and the wife and the baby survived. But he managed to get a similar requirement passed in Colorado. His focus is on breaking down the DUIs by substance, and so trying to gather that information and have that information available. Is this a marijuana DUI? Is this a meth DUI, et cetera? It requires a lot of the labs. So, Blaze, I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at it, but it essentially requires the ACJC to collect and then report out on the breakdown of substances involved. And there's quite a breakdown: central nervous system, depressants, stimulants, hallucinogens, anesthetics, analgesics, inhalants, cannabis. It's quite a lot of detailed information. I'm not sure that information is available. I'm not really sure how it would work through the Crime Lab's perspective. I'd be curious, Blaze, if you've taken a look at it, if you have an opinion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Sheila, our Crime Lab director has serious concerns about the specificity that this bill would require for the reports, and it would be a high level of workload for them to produce this on an annual basis.
It's probably an unfunded mandate in that sense. I know that we, in our criminal cases, were frequently waiting for the Crime Lab to be able to just keep up with the current demand.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, Sheila, to that point, I also had a conversation with, I believe, the gentleman who is the main proponent of this bill, Mr. Ed Wood. Is that who contacted you?
Yes.
My understanding is what he was able to accomplish in Colorado had to do with the breath alcohol test devices that are out in the field, and there's a certain device, or once you get to a newer model of the device, they have the ability to connect to a database remotely and report different information. In Arizona, a majority of the breathalyzers that exist out there are not of that model and unable to accommodate that reporting requirement. And I explained that to him as another challenge in implementing the provisions of this bill.
Mr. Chair, this is Steve Small.
Director Byers, sorry, Steve.
That's okay. Just a quick question for Blaze. Has he been referred to Alberto at GOHS? Because Alberto already collects a lot of this information and dispenses the current breathalyzers to every agency throughout the state.
Mr. Chairman, Steve, that is a great point. Mr. Wood has asked a follow-up question that I need to get back with him on, and I'd be happy to make that recommendation to him when I do talk to him.
All right, Mr. Chairman and members, is there any more discussion or how we would proceed? I guess we will continue discussions with Representative Kavanaugh.
That sounds appropriate, unless we want to oppose it. You seem comfortable tracking it for a while with the representative. Is that the way you want to go?
Mr. Chairman, members, and again, along the lines what Ms. Polk has stated, I think, and we have stated this to Representative Kavanaugh, that House Bill 2166 is currently in progress, and is the other reason why Representative Blackman has said he will not hear any data bills in his committee, because he is respecting the process and the importance of us following that process till we report out this year on our findings.
Mr. Chair and members, to me, this becomes part of the conversation about where we end up in August through November. After we know what the data points are and what people are interested in getting, we can determine whether or not they're available. And if not available, whether or not that's something the legislature wants to add and what the cost adding it might be. But at least we're having a conversation around data that we know is available to have the conversation about where we want to end up. So I would agree. Let us go ahead and speak to Mr. Kavanaugh about that and see if he's willing to allow us to include this as part of the discussion this fall.
Sounds like a plan, unless somebody has an objection. Okay, thank you, Andy and Molly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. And with that concludes my legislative report.
Okay, thank you. Any comment or discussion before we move to item 4? Hearing none, item 4 is a call to the public. Have you received any inquiries from the public wanting to make comment?
Mr. Chairman, no, we have not received any inquiries to speak to us. I'm just taking a quick look right now just to double check. No, sir, we do not have anyone who requested to speak.
Okay, about an hour ago, we projected this to be a short meeting. We've gone an hour. Next week on the 11th, I have a commitment at 2 p.m. that I can't reschedule. So if we do want to meet next week, the options as I see it would be to start at 1. I could ask somebody else to chair the meeting, or we could wait 2 weeks. What's the pleasure of the group?
I think there's going to be a lot happening in the next week, so I would recommend that we meet next week and just meet at 1 o'clock.
Is that okay with the group?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So our next meeting will be February 11th, 2022 at 1 p.m. Virtually.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to ask staff at ACJC, when this meeting is over, would one of you be available to help me troubleshoot this issue that I have with audio? So we'll hang up this meeting, and then perhaps you could schedule another Google Meet to troubleshoot with me if you have a few minutes.
Certainly, Ms. Polk.
Thank you.
I think your system's just haunted, Sheila.
Well, it's funny, my speakers work with every other virtual platform, and then I get on Google Meets and I have this trouble. So I'm sure it's operator error. I'm the first to say it's probably going to be some silly thing at my end.
Or mine. Anything further before we close?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to know, this is Jean Bishop. I will be in DC on the 11th, so I won't be attending either in person or virtually.
Okay, thank you.
I think you guys can get along without me for one meeting now.
We'll try. Anybody else who can't make it, try to send a proxy. And hearing no further business, I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.